Welcome back to The Price of Business. I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. You know that song, Greece is the word. It's the buzzword throughout the media, throughout the world this week. And boy, there's a lot of debate about the financial crisis in Greece. It's really been going on. It's a protracted crisis now that's been going on for around 7 years, and of course took many years before then to accumulate. And it's getting ugly and dicey there. People who are literally trying to live on 30 euros a day there in that country because their banks aren't allowed to give more to try to prevent a run on the banks. It's a really frightening situation. And whenever it's a frightening situation in the economic front, I like to bring on Brian Domitrovic because he is a brilliant economic historian. He can put a lot of these things in the context that the listener will appreciate, and he's a great friend of The Price of Business. How are you, Brian?
I'm great, Kevin. How are you?
Well, doing well, thanks. And so Greece is the word. I mean, it's hard to find any publication that doesn't have it on the front page, be it online or be it on paper all over the world. And I think the reason why is because the implications are worldwide, aren't they?
Yeah, they're worldwide, perhaps in a different direction, in a more positive direction than maybe is being reported. I mean, Greece's negotiating position is awful. If they leave the euro, it will clearly strengthen the Eurozone. So European Union doesn't necessarily have a strong incentive to kind of rescue Greece. And if you've noticed, the euro exchange rate against the dollar has gone up nicely in the last few days and weeks, and that probably is on the assumption that Greece is going to leave the euro.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious and pretty clear. There seems to be two camps, one of them of which is represented by Germany, which is saying, no, we can't do this. We cannot, a deal's a deal, and the Greeks broke it. And then the French is like, we don't have any choice but to bail them out, which I think is, I guess you could say is kind of also a conflict in worldviews, with one being more conservative in Germany and obviously the other one being socialist. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. German history, and we think about German history as a big event in the middle of the 20th century, but in many ways, the central economic event in the German mindset does not pertain to World War II, but pertains to the 1920s, when Germany went through the most severe hyperinflation that a modern nation has ever endured. The price level in Germany in the early 1920s went up 1.4 trillion-fold. I said that correct, 1.4 trillion-fold. If a piece of beef jerky cost 1 mark in 1920, 3 years later it cost 50 times Bill Gates' fortune. That is what Germany experienced, and the Germans do not want a repeat of that. They do not want to fund budget deficits with fiat money. That consciousness is with them in 2015.
Yeah, no question about it. When it was cheaper to wallpaper your wall with money than to buy wallpaper, and it took a barrel of Deutschmarks to buy a loaf of bread, it's pretty sobering.
Yeah, the funny thing about France is France used to be a hard money country. I mean, all the way through Charles de Gaulle, France insisted that the franc be backed in gold, not just the dollar. And I don't know where they all of a sudden started to fall in love with fiat money. It's probably just some kind of power trip with Germany. But Germany knows that the one thing Europe can do to really destroy itself, aside from all the regulatory overreach, is just go to fiat money. And they founded the Eurozone not to have fiat money, and they're going to provide for the Grexit to make sure that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's no doubt about that. So what do you see happening? And by the way, as if it is any of the United States' business, Barack Obama is weighing in that that Europe needs to figure out how to bail Greece out. What do you think is going to end up happening in this situation? My concern is, to me, it's not a simple cut and dry type of situation. On the one hand, if they go ahead and figure out a way of giving Greece a break, it sure incentivizes other countries that have also struggled, like Spain, with their own euro crisis, to go ahead and fall into crisis. All of a sudden, you do have a too big to fail mentality becomes pervasive around the culture. On the other hand, the requirements and the austerity measures that they put on Greece really made it virtually impossible for them to attract the moneyed people necessary to allow them to grow out of their economic mess, and to create the ability to pay it off. It really was a country stuck in between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, on the first point that Barack Obama is stoking, that this might result in an international crisis, it's very interesting that both the euro has appreciated and gold has gone down as this crisis has gone on, which indicates that the international community of investors sees the Grexit as an improvement upon the status quo ante.
Yeah, the strong line is an improvement.
Yeah. I mean, the European Union is putting its foot down on not having fiat money, not funding exorbitant budget deficits with new money. That attracts investment to the Eurozone, hence the appreciation of the currency, hence the pulling of money out of gold. On the second point, Greece actually might have a very bright future if it does certain things. Greece could then have its own currency that is tied to the euro or tied to the dollar or tied to gold, and it could have a low flat rate of taxes. It would see investment rush into the country, as has happened in many countries in Central and Eastern Europe, which have adopted what are called currency boards and low flat rate taxes. They can actually get out of the common policy of high taxes and regulation in the Eurozone and then attract investment through their low tax policy, if that's the step they're ready to take.
Yeah.
They should be, because they get rich.
And a lot of their prime ministers, obviously, are not, I would say. Their
Bernie
prime minister,
Sanders socialists over there, yeah.
Their prime minister is a Marxist. You know, he's only become, he only became he's changed his party name in order to make himself electable. But the guy's a Marxist, and I think he's going to, try to gain an enormous amount of power through the chaos they're creating.
Yeah, I mean, Vladimir Lenin certainly advocated the policy of printing money to destroy the capitalist system. Okay, yeah, you can do that, but Angela Merkel at this point in time is not going to be fooled by that 100-year-old trick.
Yeah, it's pretty old. And boy, I tell you, she has shown herself to be an extremely capable leader during this situation.
It's funny how she's always rated as a more powerful person than President Obama.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Mickey Mouse is just barely below him anyway. So yeah, that's interesting. So, and I do think it's a tremendous opportunity. I wish it had been a referendum on the prime minister, or on the government rather than on, whether or not to stay with the euro. But apparently he probably would have won that too. There's this incredible culture of entitlement now that seems pretty pervasive there in Greece. That somehow, we're being held blackmail. This is blackmail. Right, it's blackmail that you perpetrated against yourselves, Greek people.
Yeah, I'm not opposed necessarily to that no vote, in that no vote also implies a rejection of the massive subsidies that the European Union was going to pump into the Greek government-supported economy. So Greece will be freed of those subsidies, and that should get investment moving in the right direction again. It should actually decrease government spending. That must mean, if tax policy is correct, if they have a good monetary policy, that jobs will be created. So I think if the socialists in Greece thought that they were kind of getting their way with voting no, they just rejected a lot of free government subsidies from the European Union.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, do you think who's going to blink here? Now, who's going to end up, what do you envision happening? I know you're an economist, not a, political prognosticator, but what's your sense of the situation?
Well, I think the major countries in the Eurozone are aware that they can take a very positive step for the future in terms of guaranteeing international confidence in the euro. So I don't see a lot of incentive on the major powers in the Eurozone in bending over backwards to Greece anymore. There could be a compromise in the other direction, but I think Europe's going to be a tough negotiator. I would expect a Grexit.
Mm-hmm. And do you think they end up staying in the Union?
Well, I'm not terribly familiar with the Articles of Agreement of the European Union, exactly how you can disentangle yourself and so forth there from Brussels. But the most important thing is that they would have to establish a currency that is actually going to get investors to put their money in enterprises that return drachmas. And then the second thing they're going to have to do is figure out how to get out of that crazy regulatory tax system so as to increase investment. So it's actually an opportunity, crazy enough, for tax and regulatory reform.
Yeah, but again, it's all predicated on who they have, involved in this.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many examples right around there. Bulgaria, Poland, that have done exactly these things in these circumstances, and they have profited and prospered greatly from those kinds of demonstrations. And if Greece really wants to kind of grow up, that's the opportunity it should seize.
Well, I look at where Tunisia is, and really it's not all that far from Greece. it was seen to me that that people would look at that situation in Greece and be a little concerned about things like ISIS and being out there alone, and is there an opportunity to be a part of the union like the UK is, where they are in every way but monetarily? I don't know. To me, it's a pretty dicey situation. I do like your optimism. You sound very Jack Kempish this morning. That sounds like something that Jack Kemp would have said, and so I like that optimism, and I certainly hope they end up taking that route. But it sure doesn't seem like they have those kind of people in a position to do so.
Yeah, I mean, and ISIS, of course, is as rapacious as any organization, as we've seen in the last generation, and so they will try to play with this fire. And if the Marxists in Greece fall for that, you're right, that could be catastrophic.
Yeah, because Greece is going to be in chaos. It's going to be very vulnerable, and I can see someone like ISIS exploit it. We're now learning that the major provider of the illegal migration of people from the continent of Africa to Europe is being funded by ISIS, backed by ISIS, even ISIS boats. So they've got an interesting business operation where they persecute people off of the continent, and then they provide the transportation which people have to pay for to get off of the continent. What a great way of stockpiling those boats with potential, a fifth column that can be used later on. Many of those, I think many of those people who are fleeing are actually part of a fifth column for ISIS. That's my speculation.
I think no, and ISIS wants to stop fooling around in the Middle East. I mean, they want the Balkan Europe. I mean, they know that was a major part of Islamic history 1,000 years ago, and their priorities are all the way through Rome, as we know.
Yeah.
A return to the 11th century status quo.
Yeah.
So that is, that's a security problem.
And think of all the graven images in Greece that they'd have fun with. Man, oh man, it's scary to think about. All right, Dr. Brian Domitrovic, you can find him over at Forbes magazine, and always a delight to have you on the show.
It was great to be here, Kevin.
Oh, you bet. When we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here can be found over there at usdatareview.com, and this is The Price of Business.